Obama's third term. There's rumors of, and these are friends of mine that are moderate Democrats say that they thought it was Elizabeth Warren running it. They thought it was Bernie Sanders running it. But I think the general consensus, I think if you asked, the majority of the population, I think it was Obama's third term.
It was for sure Obama's third term. I don't think that's even a question. I don't think anyone, it definitely was. And that's why you saw Obama fighting for his dear life. Why was he fighting so hard?
Barack Obama's carefully polished image has always been his greatest weapon, but also his biggest illusion. He wasn't just sold as a president. He was packaged like a brand, complete with slogans, logos, and a glow of inevitability. Yet, when someone like Lindi Li dismantles that mythology, the result isn't just a critique. It's a demolition job. Because once you strip away the rhetoric and celebrity sheen, what remains isn't a visionary leader, but a man whose legacy is thinner than the speeches that built it.
Well, I want to tell you now, having been to holiday parties in DC, people are pissed. And just echoing what Megan said, you're totally right. People are pissed at Obama. There are people who are now multi-millionaires as a result of the Harris campaign, and we know exactly who they are. And I just want to say that $500 million in advertising went to just 4 well-connected Democratic firms. This whole thing is deeply incestuous, and one of the firms is Bully Pulpit.
Lindi Li doesn't just poke at Obama's carefully maintained reputation. She rips it apart, piece by piece, exposing the contradictions that even his most loyal admirers prefer to ignore. Obama was marketed as a political savior, the ultimate antidote to cynicism. But Li highlights the irony that he became the very embodiment of it. He promised transformation, yet delivered maintenance of the status quo.
It definitely was. And that's why you saw Obama fighting for his dear life. Why was he fighting so hard in the fall? Because he was fighting for his fourth term. He was fighting for his own legacy. The relationship between Obama and Biden is most reminiscent of that between LBJ and JFK. JFK had little respect for Lyndon B. Johnson, but he picked him anyway because he wanted to win the South. He wanted to win Texas.
He preached transparency, yet governed with secrecy. He claimed unity, yet left behind a country more divided than ever. The contrast between the myth and the reality is the core of Li's roast, and it hits harder than any partisan attack ever could. She starts with the biggest illusion, the idea that Obama was a bold reformer. The man whose campaign was built on hope and change left behind a trail of half measures and broken promises.
Was Obama around Hunter? Did you see anything?
I don't remember seeing anything. Obama, one of the biggest casualties of the 2024 election, it's Obama.
I agree.
Yeah, and not just in the eyes of Republicans, but in the eyes of Democratic donors, like the people who matter behind the scenes. People are so fed up with Obama, and also the Obama consultants, Obama veterans.
Like Guantanamo Bay, still open. The wars he vowed to end expanded. The surveillance state, supercharged. Lindi Li makes it clear that Obama's presidency was less about revolution and more about preservation, where the lofty ideals of the campaign were quietly sacrificed on the altar of political convenience. He wasn't a breaker of chains. He was a caretaker of an old order with a shinier face.
Obama thought that Biden would eventually fuck everything up. And that's eventually actually what happened. So, but also he didn't have much faith in Kamala Harris. Before she ascended to the top role, he was vetting people like Mark Kelly and Andy Bashir. Most party chieftains didn't have Kamala Harris as their number one choice. But in the party of DEI, you can't skip a black woman.
And then there's the economy, the great feather in his cap. Obama loves to remind the world that he inherited a financial crisis and brought stability back. But Li tears into the reality. The banks got bailouts while ordinary Americans got crumbs. Wall Street was rescued, but Main Street was left to fend for itself. The supposed champion of the people became the guardian of the elites, ensuring that the wealth gap widened under his watch. It's not just a failure, it's a betrayal of the very message he used to get elected. Li doesn't let up when it comes to foreign policy, either. Obama's Nobel Peace Prize has aged into one of history's cruelest ironies. Awarded before he even had time to make decisions, it became a cosmic joke when his administration became synonymous with drone strikes and military interventions. Lindi Li paints the picture with biting precision, a man celebrated as a dove who turned out to be just another hawk with better speechwriters. His foreign policy wasn't about peace. It was about polishing the same imperial machinery while pretending it was progress. What makes Li's dismantling so devastating is that she doesn't just stop at the policy failures. She digs into the persona itself. Obama was the first social media president, the influencer before influencers. He knew how to sell himself, how to control a narrative, how to weaponize charisma in a way that made critics look bitter and out of touch. But charisma can't cover for hollow achievements forever.
These people make so much money. You got to remember that $500 million, which were advertising fees, went to just 4 well-connected Democratic firms, and all of them are run by Obama veterans.
Wait, $500 million?
$500 million.
Advertising fees.
Like TV ads. Like every time you know, like when you run political ads, whoever puts it up for you gets a percentage.
Li calls it what it is, style over substance. A presidency that thrived on applause, but left behind little more than clever sound bites and a Netflix deal. The Netflix deal itself becomes part of the roast. Li doesn't miss the chance to hammer the absurdity of a former president turning his brand into an entertainment empire, churning out content instead of substance. It's not just a side hustle, it's the ultimate metaphor for Obama's career. He's less a statesman and more a celebrity who once had a temporary lease on the Oval Office. The lines between politics and Hollywood didn't blur with Obama, they vanished entirely. And then there's the cult of personality. Obama supporters often act as though his legacy is untouchable, insulated from criticism by the force of nostalgia. Scandals slid off him like rain off a waxed car. Whether it was the failures of Obamacare's rollout, the entrenchment of the surveillance state, or the lack of meaningful progress on race relations, Obama always managed to escape the blame. He was the master of deflection, the president of plausible deniability.
What were they
out of
telling your
bounds.
mom? And how soon was it? After the election? Like,
A
when
week or
was
two.
it?
When it wasn't at that point, I was just asking questions. Like, it wasn't even. I was like, "What happened to the $2.5 billion we raised? Why did we spend it on Beyonce? Why did we spend 2.5? Why did we spend millions of dollars on Oprah?" Like legitimate questions that needed to be answered. But the amount of hate I got for that was just overwhelming. And the final straw, the moment that I knew that I needed to leave, was actually around Christmas Eve, when the chair of the party, he's the biggest clown that the Democrats.
Lindi Li exposes the trick for what it is. Not leadership, but political escapology, an art of slipping out of responsibility while keeping the applause going. Even his post-presidency becomes fair game. Instead of stepping back with humility, Obama has remained a hovering presence in American politics, delivering lectures and casting himself as the wise elder statesman. But as Li points out, wisdom isn't just about speaking eloquently. It's about learning from mistakes and admitting them. Obama has done neither. He continues to project himself as a flawless figure, untouched by the chaos of the years that followed. It's an act that would almost be impressive if it weren't so transparent. Li also dismantles the idea that Obama was a unifier. Compared to the chaos of subsequent administrations, his polished image shines brighter in hindsight. But Li warns against this lazy nostalgia, reminding everyone that failure looks less like screaming headlines and more like quiet disappointment. Obama's presidency was a slow erosion of expectation, a death by 1,000 compromises dressed up as victories. And perhaps the cruelest part of Li's roast is how she frames Obama not as a villain, but as a mirage. People wanted to believe so badly that they projected greatness onto him. He became the vessel of collective longing, the canvas for everyone's hope.
They were hoping for.
I don't think Pelosi was hoping for anyone in particular, or not that I know of. I do know that Obama was carefully vetting Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona. I know there were other names on his list. I'm not saying that Kamala Harris was necessarily at the top of the list, but he was definitely considering other candidates. I don't think she was ruled out. I just think that everyone is, a lot of people, the chieftains of the party, were hoping for a lightning round, a lightning primary.
But the canvas was always empty, and the illusion was always fragile. Once it's exposed, it can't be unseen. Obama wasn't the beginning of something new. He was the final flourish of the old politics dressed up as revolution. By the time Lindi Li finishes, Obama's reputation doesn't look like the soaring monument his admirers built. It looks like a hollow statue, majestic from a distance, but crumbling on closer inspection. The speeches, the slogans, the carefully staged photos, they all fade when weighed against the reality of 8 years that promised the world but delivered far less. And that's what makes the roast so effective. It's not fueled by anger, but by clarity. What makes Lindi Li's takedown even more potent is how she frames Obama's presidency as the template for political disappointment in the modern era. He wasn't just another politician who failed to deliver. He was the one who raised the bar higher than anyone else and then walked away, leaving it untouched.
So Obama loses credibility. Would you put him at the top as a person that lost the most credibility in 2024 election? As a Democrat.
Underneath Harris and Obama, underneath
Harris.
Biden and Harris, yeah, absolutely. And you could tell that he was fighting for his third term. Like, he was fighting for his life out there. Remember the time he was lambasting black men for not voting
Yes.
for? Exactly.
Yes.
Like, that was a bit too much.
Lecturing them.
Exactly.
And,
It was very condescending.
That gulf between promise and reality is what defines his legacy, and Li hammers it home relentlessly. She highlights how Obama's image was built on the idea of generational change, of breaking with the old guard and ushering in something new. But when you peel away the soaring speeches, what you find is a president who filled his administration with Washington insiders, Wall Street loyalists, and the same entrenched power brokers he once campaigned against. Li calls it the great bait and switch, the political equivalent of ordering a gourmet meal, only to be served reheated leftovers. Li paints the picture vividly, a reform that promised a cure, but delivered a bandage, all while being marketed as groundbreaking. For a president who built his brand on hope, this was a lesson in disappointment that millions of Americans felt in their wallets. Li also zeroes in on the way Obama's presidency conditioned Americans to accept mediocrity wrapped in eloquence.
They made bank. We were advertising in Florida, where we had no chance of winning simply because of the advertising fees. This is a boondoggle. And I'm wondering if they asked us for millions of dollars. Remember how I told you about the dinner? Were they asking us for money 2 weeks before they knew they were going to lose? Because they realized for the next 4 to 8 years it was never going to come again, and they wanted to milk us for as much money as possible?
Every failure was excused because the speeches were so smooth, the optics so impeccable. People began to equate good delivery with good leadership, as though the ability to inspire was a substitute for the ability to govern. Lindi Li skewers this cultural flaw, pointing out that Obama didn't just fail to change the system, he lulled people into accepting it, anesthetized by his charisma. The most striking part of her dismantling, though, is how she positions Obama as the father of disillusionment. By setting such high expectations and failing to meet them, he didn't just let down his supporters. He created an entire generation of cynics. The energy that once filled stadiums with chants of hope curdled into apathy and bitterness. Li argues that this is Obama's true legacy, not inspiration, but the hollow echo of what could have been. When people stopped believing in him, they stopped believing in politics altogether. That vacuum paved the way for chaos to follow. Li even drills into Obama's obsession with his own image, the way he still lingers on the world stage like a celebrity who refuses to leave the spotlight.
So I should also mention that that night, Obama himself was shocked to see Biden's decline. You could tell. And he was like holding Biden by the hand and shepherding him off the stage because Biden didn't know to leave the stage after the event was over. And you could just tell people in the crowd, like, looking at each other saying, like, what's going on? But everyone was playing their part in an emperor has no clothes situation.
His speeches, documentaries, and books, everything is designed to remind people of the myth. But the more he tries to preserve the illusion, the more glaring the cracks become. Li likens it to an aging actor refusing to retire, clinging to roles that no longer fit. Instead of appearing timeless, he looks out of touch, a relic of a moment that has long since passed. She doesn't stop there. The racial narrative of Obama's presidency is another area where Li applies the knife. The gap between what he represented and what he achieved is a wound that still lingers. Even Obama's much-vaunted oratory isn't safe from her roast.
The truth is, if you add it all up, even the year, if the odds were you're going to be married to your partner for 50 years and 10 of those years could be bad, you'd
sign up for it.
You'd sign up for it.
You'd sign up for it.
Right. And that's really how it works out.
Is it, Michelle? It's not. I've been married for 17 and a half years and not one was bad. I think she and he married the wrong people.
Yes, he could deliver a speech like no other, but Li exposes how those speeches often lacked substance. They were beautifully written, perfectly performed, and utterly forgettable once the applause died down. They inspired emotions in the moment, but offered little in the way of lasting impact. Li compares them to fireworks. His defenders can cling to the idea that he was historic, that he broke barriers and inspired millions. But Li's point is that breaking barriers is not the same as breaking molds. Inspiring millions is not the same as transforming a nation. Obama may have symbolized progress, but he failed to deliver it in tangible form.